One daughter is a doctor, the other one is a maid, my father announced, raising his glass in front of 14 guests at our family Thanksgiving dinner. And then he laughed. And then they all laughed. My 8-year-old daughter was sitting right next to me. She tugged my sleeve and whispered, "Mommy, is being a maid bad?" That was the last Thanksgiving I stayed silent, because what I said next, in front of every single person at that table, changed everything. And my father? He hasn't hosted a holiday dinner since. But before I tell you what I said that night, you need to understand what happened in the 6 years before, and why the man my father was trying so hard to impress all evening was the one person in that room who already knew exactly who I was. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. My name is Thea O'Neill. I'm 31 years old. I'm a single mom, and for the past 6 years my family has called me the Maid. Now let me take you back to the spring of 6 years ago, the week I moved home with nothing but 2 suitcases and a 2-year-old on my hip. The drive from Richmond to Millbrook takes about 2 hours if you don't stop. I stopped 3 times because Lily kept crying. She was 2. She didn't understand why Daddy wasn't in the car. Honestly, neither did I. My ex-husband left on a Tuesday, cleared the checking account on Wednesday, filed from his mother's address on Thursday. By Friday, I was standing on my parents' porch in Millbrook, Virginia, holding a diaper bag and whatever dignity I had left. My father opened the door. He looked at the suitcases, then at me, then at Lily. "The cottage out back is empty," he said. "This is temporary. Don't turn it into a habit." No hug, no, "Are you okay?" Just terms. The cottage was 300 square feet. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, a bathroom with a shower that ran cold after 4 minutes. But it sat on my parents' land, and there was no lease, no paperwork, just my father's word. At the time, I didn't think that mattered. Within a week, I was knocking on doors, cleaning houses, $15 an hour, cash, while a neighbor watched Lily. I scrubbed bathtubs, mopped hardwood, organized pantries for women who had the life I thought I'd have by now. That same month, Meredith, my older sister, finished her dermatology residency. My parents threw a dinner for 20 people. I showed up late because I was still wiping bleach off my hands at a client's house across town. Richard, my father, didn't miss the chance. He stood at the head of the table and said, loud enough for every guest to hear, "Sorry, Thea's late. She was scrubbing someone's bathtub." Everyone chuckled. Meredith looked away. I sat down and didn't say a word. That was the first time. It would not be the last. The thing is, the jokes didn't start when I moved home. They started long before I ever left. Growing up, Meredith was the one who got SAT tutoring, AP summer camps, college visits to Duke and UVA. When she got accepted to medical school, my father took out a second mortgage to cover her tuition. Every penny, no hesitation. When it was my turn, he sat me down at the kitchen table and said, "Community college is plenty for someone like you." Someone like me. I still hear that phrase when I close my eyes. I went to Blue Ridge Community College. I paid for it myself, waitressing, babysitting, cleaning the church on Sundays. I graduated in 2 years with honors. Nobody came to the ceremony. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every Easter brunch, my father would introduce us the same way. "This is my daughter, Dr. Meredith O'Neill Hartley." Then he'd turn, almost as an afterthought. "And this is Thea." Not Thea, who graduated with honors. Not Thea, who's raising a child on her own. Just Thea. My mother never once corrected him. When I brought it up, Patricia would sigh and press her fingers against her temples. "Your father just wants the best for both of you. Don't be so sensitive." Here's what nobody at those holiday tables knew. Meredith's medical school cost $400,000. My father covered about half. The rest? Federal loans. $180,000 in debt that Meredith was still carrying, silently, invisibly, while everyone called her the successful one. But at the O'Neill table, image was everything, and my image had already been decided for me. At least, that's what they thought. It happened the way most things happen when you're desperate, not with a plan, with a pattern. By my second year back in Millbrook, I'd cleaned over 60 homes, and I started to notice something. The Shenandoah Valley was full of vacation estates, big properties owned by people who lived in D.C. or Richmond and visited maybe 4 times a year. These houses needed more than cleaning. They needed managing. Groundskeepers, maintenance schedules, guest turnover. Somebody who could walk a plumber through the front door at 7 a.m. and lock up after the caterer at midnight. Nobody was doing it well. I filed for an LLC, built a website at 2 in the morning while Lily slept, named the company Magnolia Estate Services. It sounded bigger than it was, which at the time was just me and a second-hand laptop. I signed my first 3 property contracts in the same month. Not huge, but real. I told my mother. I was excited. I said, "Mom, I just signed 3 clients. I'm building something." Patricia nodded. "That's nice, honey. Meredith just got invited to speak at a dermatology conference in Boston." I stood in the kitchen holding my phone with the contract confirmations still open. And I understood, completely, finally, permanently, that nothing I built would ever register in this house. I could cure cancer, and my mother would ask if Meredith had cured it first. That night, after Lily was asleep, my phone rang. An unknown number with a 540 area code. "Hi," the voice said. "I'm Gloria. I'm your father's sister, and I think we need to talk." I almost dropped the phone. Because in this family, Gloria Ashford was a name you didn't say out loud. My father had a sister, past tense, at least in his version. Gloria Ashford divorced her husband 10 years before my call. In a town like Millbrook, where the Rotary Club still opened meetings with a prayer and couples who separated moved to different counties. That was enough to become a scandal. But Gloria didn't move. She stayed. Opened an antique shop on Birch Street. Lived alone and liked it. Richard cut her off completely. Told us she was a disgrace to the family name. I hadn't spoken to her in a decade. "I heard about you from a mutual client," Gloria said over coffee the next week. Her shop smelled like cedar and old books. "A woman whose lake house you manage. She couldn't stop talking about you." Small towns. Everyone knows someone who knows someone. Gloria didn't waste time. "I want to invest in your company. $15,000. Not a loan, equity. Because somebody should have believed in you a long time ago." I stared at her. 15,000 was more than I'd made in the last 3 months combined. "I'm not doing this to spite your brother," she added, like she could read my mind. "Then why?" "Because I know what it's like to be erased from a family for choosing your own life." She set her cup down. "Sound familiar?" I took the money, hired 2 part-time employees, started running operations like a real company instead of a one-woman scramble. Before I left, Gloria said something that stayed with me. "Family should be a safe place, Thea, not a cage." Then she paused. "There's something I know about your father that you don't, but not yet." I drove home with more questions than answers, and a check that would change everything. 2 years. That's how long the quiet lasted. By 27, I had 5 employees, 8 properties under contract, and a growing reputation in the valley. Magnolia was still small, but it was real. I reinvested every dollar, bought a proper work van, printed business cards with a logo Lily helped me pick. A white magnolia on dark green. I was still living in the cottage, still on my father's land, still without a lease. That's when Richard decided to remind me. It was a Sunday dinner, the only kind my parents hosted where they didn't invite an audience. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, Meredith and Donald across the table, Lily coloring in the corner. Midway through the meal, Richard set his fork down. "That land out back is worth something now," he said. Casual, like he was commenting on the weather. "I might need to rearrange things." I looked up. "Rearrange things how?" "Don't worry about it. Just know that nothing is permanent." The room went quiet. Meredith stared at her plate. Donald took a long drink of water. Patricia busied herself with the salt shaker. Nobody said a word. Because in this family, when Richard made a statement, it wasn't a conversation. It was a verdict. Later that night, after Lily was in bed, Patricia called me. Her voice was strained, halfway between apologetic and instructional. "Someone came to look at the property last week," she said. "A developer." My stomach dropped. What developer? I don't know the details. Your father handles these things. A pause. It's probably nothing. I shouldn't have mentioned it. She hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed in the cottage, on land I didn't own, in a house with no lease, and felt the ground shift beneath me. I started looking for a rental. Something near Lily's school, something I could afford. The problem with Millbrook is that it's a small town with a tight housing market. 3-bedroom rentals near Jefferson Elementary? Almost non-existent. And the ones that were available cost twice what I could swing without pulling money out of the business. Patricia found out within a week. In a town this size, the realtor I called was her friend's daughter. The phone rang at 8 in the morning. You're looking at apartments? Patricia's voice was shaking. You're going to take Lily away from us? Mom, I'm not taking anyone away. Your father will be devastated after everything we've done for you. I wanted to ask what exactly they'd done, but I didn't. That evening, Richard called. No preamble. You move out, you're on your own. Completely. His voice was flat, factual. Don't expect us to babysit Lily on weekends. Don't expect Thanksgiving invitations. Are you serious? I'm being practical. He knew exactly where to press. Lily called my parents every night before bed. She drew pictures of Grandpa's garden. She counted the days between visits. Cutting that connection wasn't something I could do to my daughter, and he knew it. So I stopped looking. I wasn't staying because I was weak. I was staying because leaving at the wrong time would have cost me everything I'd built. In a small town, Richard O'Neill was respected. If I left, he'd frame it as abandonment. The ungrateful daughter who took our granddaughter away. That narrative would reach every potential client within 20 miles. I needed to be strong enough that when I finally walked out, I wouldn't need anything from him. Not his land, not his babysitting, not his version of the story. That day wasn't here yet, but it was coming. The cracks started showing in Lily first. Her teacher called me in on a Wednesday. Mrs. Patterson, kind woman, 20 years in 2nd grade. Lily's been quiet at lunch, she said. The other kids asked what her mom does for work. She didn't answer. She just shrugged and looked away. I sat in that tiny plastic chair and felt something inside me splinter. My daughter, 8 years old, already learning to be ashamed of me. That night, I tucked Lily in and she asked, Mommy, do you like your job? I love my job, baby. Then why does Grandpa always say it funny? I kissed her forehead and turned off the light. Then I went to the kitchen, sat at the table, and stared at the wall for an hour. This wasn't about me anymore. Richard's jokes, his little performance at every holiday, they were seeping into my daughter's bones. She was 8, and she was already learning that her mother wasn't worth being proud of. That same week, an opportunity landed in my inbox. A new luxury development in the valley. 12 vacation homes, full-service management contract. The owner was looking for a single firm to handle everything. Annual value, $340,000. Enough to double my revenue. Enough to hire a full team. Enough to leave the cottage for good. I called Gloria, told her about the opportunity and about Lily. She was quiet for a moment. Then, fear is a landlord too, Thea, and the rent keeps going up. That night, I picked up the phone and dialed the developer. 2 rings. A voice answered. Steady, professional, unhurried. Frank Calloway, Calloway Development. What can I do for you? I took a breath, and I pitched. Frank Calloway didn't say yes on the first call. He said, send me your portfolio. So I did. Every property photo, every client reference, every maintenance report I'd ever filed. I formatted it like a woman who had something to prove, because I did. 3 days later, Frank called back. I asked around, he said. 3 different property owners in the valley told me the same thing. If you want it done right, you call Magnolia. We met at his office in Staunton the following Monday. I wore the one blazer I owned, the one that still smelled faintly of dry cleaning chemicals because I'd only had it cleaned once. Frank shook my hand, looked me in the eye, and said, You're the real deal, Thea. Let's do this. I signed a 2-year management contract for 3 properties, the initial phase of his development. Just like that, Magnolia went from a 1-van operation to a company with real infrastructure. I hired 4 new people that month. That same week, at home, the other shoe dropped. Richard called me to his study. The room smelled like pipe tobacco and old leather, the room where he made pronouncements, not requests. "I need you to sign some papers," he said. "What papers?" "An agreement. That you'll vacate the cottage by March." "March? That's 4 months away." "Plenty of time." I looked at the document on his desk. Professional letterhead, legal language, a move-out date printed in bold. "Why?" I said. He leaned back. "Because it's my property, that's why." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I stared at that document and noticed the name of a law firm, not a family attorney, a commercial real estate firm. Someone was buying this land. "I'm not signing anything tonight," I said. "I'll read it first." I walked out. My hands were steady. My heart was not. Patricia's approach was always softer. That was what made it worse. She invited me for tea the next morning. The kitchen smelled like chamomile. She'd set out the good cups, the ones with the gold rims, a peace offering wrapped in porcelain. "Your father is under a lot of stress," she began, eyes damp, hands folded, the performance of a concerned mother rehearsed to perfection. "His investments haven't been doing well. He needs to sell that land, Thea." "Then why didn't he just talk to me?" "We are talking. You're just not listening." I set my cup down. "You're asking me to move my daughter out of the only stable home she's known, in 4 months, without telling me why until I found out on my own." Patricia's expression shifted. The softness thinned. "Meredith would never make things this difficult. Meredith doesn't live in a cottage on Dad's land." "Exactly." She looked straight at me. "Because Meredith made something of herself." The words landed like a slap. Not because they were cruel, I'd heard worse, but because they came from my mother, the woman who used to braid my hair before school, the woman who was supposed to be safe. I stood up. I left the tea on the table. I didn't slam the door. I just closed it behind me, which somehow felt louder. That night, sitting on the cottage porch while Lily slept, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I hadn't seen in months. "Meredith. Can we talk, privately?" I stared at the screen for a long time. My sister hadn't texted me in over a year. Not for my birthday, not for Lily's, not for anything. And now, out of nowhere, she wanted to talk. Something was wrong. I just didn't know which part yet. We met at a coffee shop in Waynesboro, 20 minutes from Millbrook, far enough that nobody would report back. Meredith looked different. Not bad, exactly. Just reduced. Her hair was pulled back. No earrings. The confident posture I'd grown up envying had softened into something closer to exhaustion. She ordered black coffee. I ordered the same. We sat near the window, and for a full minute, neither of us spoke. Then she said it. "Donald wants a divorce." I blinked. "Since when?" "Since July. We've been pretending for 4 months." "Why are you telling me?" She looked at her cup. "Because you're the only person in this family who knows what it's like to start over." I didn't expect that to hit as hard as it did. Meredith, the golden daughter, the one whose name opened every toast, was sitting across from me in a coffee shop asking me how to survive. Another silence, then quieter. "I know they treat you differently. I never said anything. I should have." I didn't tell her it was okay, because it wasn't. "How much debt are you carrying?" I asked instead. She flinched. 180,000. Federal loans. Donald managed the payments. "If we split?" She trailed off. I could fill in the rest. She asked if I knew a good divorce lawyer. I gave her a name, the same one I'd used 5 years ago. She wrote it down on a napkin, folded it into her purse, and for a moment looked exactly like the scared 19-year-old I remembered from before medical school, turned her into a title. I didn't feel sorry for her, but I didn't feel satisfied either. I just felt tired. Driving home, I thought about how funny it was, both O'Neill daughters, sitting in coffee shops, trying to figure out how to survive men who failed them. At that point, I kept asking myself, if Meredith was also falling apart, why did my parents need this perfect image so badly? Why had they spent decades building a showcase family when nobody inside it was actually okay? Do you think that's love? Or just fear of what the neighbors might say? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments. 3 months before Thanksgiving. That's when the phone call came. Magnolia had grown. 12 employees. 15 luxury properties across the Shenandoah Valley. Revenue had crossed the 2 million mark earlier that year, and I was running a real operation, scheduling software, uniformed crews, quarterly client reviews. The girl who scrubbed bathtubs for $15 an hour now signed contracts over lunch. Nobody in my family knew the scale. To them, I was still Thea, the one who cleans houses. Then a journalist called. "Hi, Ms. O'Neill. I'm with the Shenandoah Business Journal. We're doing a feature on local entrepreneurs under 35. Your name came up 3 times from different referrals." 3 different people had recommended me. Not Meredith, not my father's Rotary contacts. Me. I agreed to the interview on one condition. "Please don't mention my family or my personal background. This is about the business." The reporter, a young woman named Kelsey, spent 2 hours with me at one of the estate properties I managed. She took photos of the team at work. She asked about revenue, growth strategy, client retention. She treated me like a CEO, because that's what I was. "This issue publishes the week of Thanksgiving," Kelsey said as she packed up. "You'll get an advance copy." Thanksgiving. The timing felt almost poetic. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Meredith. The only person I told was Gloria, who listened on the phone and then laughed, a warm, surprised laugh. "Well," she said, "that's going to make for an interesting holiday." For the first time in 6 years, someone was asking about my work not as a punchline, but as a success story. And I carried that feeling quietly, tucked inside my chest like a lit match in a dark room. Waiting. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I was in the kitchen at the main house, helping Patricia sort through her guest list, when Richard walked in, chest puffed, holding his phone like a trophy. "Guess who's coming to Thanksgiving," he said. Patricia looked up. "Who?" "Frank Calloway." He said the name like he was announcing royalty. Frank Calloway, owner of Calloway Development Group, the biggest residential developer in the Shenandoah Valley. Richard had been circling Frank for months, trying to finalize the sale of his land. "This is my shot," Richard continued. "Calloway at our table. Good food, good wine, good impressions. By New Year's, the deal is done." I stood at the counter, holding a serving spoon, and felt my blood turn cold. Frank Calloway. The man I had a standing video call with every Tuesday at 9 a.m. The man whose properties I'd managed for 2 years. The man who called me the most reliable operator in the region. My father had never once asked the name of my company. He'd never visited my office. He'd never Googled me. And Frank? Frank had no reason to know my maiden name or that the woman who ran Magnolia Estate Services went home at night to a 300-square-foot cottage behind her father's house, 2 separate worlds, about to collide at the same dinner table. I excused myself, drove back to the cottage, called Gloria. "Frank Calloway is coming to Thanksgiving," I said. "Dad invited him." A beat of silence. Then Gloria exhaled slowly. "Well," she said, "this is going to be very interesting." "What do I do?" "Nothing. You don't have to do anything, Thea. The truth has a way of showing up on its own." Then she added, almost casually, "I have my own plans for Thanksgiving this year." I didn't ask what she meant. I probably should have. The Monday before Thanksgiving, my father called me to his study, again. This time the document was different, thicker, notarized on one side, a move-out agreement with a printed deadline, March 1st. "Sign this by Thanksgiving," Richard said. He didn't sit down. He stood behind his desk like a man used to towering over people. "After that, I'm involving a lawyer." I picked up the papers, read slowly. Move-out terms, waiver of claims to the property, and buried on the second page, the sale price. $410,000. Richard was selling the land I lived on, the land Lily knew as home. I turned to the last page and saw the buyer's name, Calloway Development Group. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I'd be sick. My father was selling the property to my biggest client, the same man he'd invited to Thanksgiving dinner. The same man who didn't know that the cottage Richard promised was empty had me and my daughter sleeping in it every night. I looked at Richard. He looked back, steady, unbothered, like a man who had already won. You told Frank the cottage was empty, I said. Not a question. It will be. Because you're making me leave. Because I'm making a business decision. I set the papers down on his desk. Didn't sign, didn't argue, just walked to the door. Thea. His voice hardened. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I turned the knob. I'm not the one making this hard, Dad. I walked to the cottage, closed the door, sat on the floor, and called my accountant. Then my lawyer. Then Gloria. Thanksgiving was in 5 days. And for the first time in 6 years, I wasn't dreading it. I was ready. Thanksgiving morning smelled like cinnamon and rosemary, and something I couldn't name, maybe dread. I woke up early, dressed Lily in her green corduroy dress, the one with the tiny embroidered leaves. She twirled in front of the mirror and asked, "Do I look pretty, Mommy?" "You look perfect." "Will Grandpa be nice today?" I knelt down, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't know, baby, but I'll be right next to you the whole time." By 9 a.m., I was in my parents' kitchen, apron on, hair up, hands in a turkey. Same as every year. Patricia assigned the cooking to me because Meredith has to get ready. As if roasting a 20-pound bird and making 4 sides from scratch wasn't work worth getting ready for. Meredith arrived at noon. Blowout, pearl earrings, cream-colored cashmere. Donald trailed behind her, silent, carrying a bottle of wine like a man carrying his own headstone. The guests trickled in. Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim, the Warrens from 2 doors down, Pastor David and his wife Ruth, Richard's cousin Ray and his wife, 2 couples from the Rotary Club, and then, at 12:30, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. Frank Calloway and his wife Donna. Richard practically sprinted to the front door, handshake, shoulder pat. "Frank, welcome, welcome. We're so glad you could make it." Frank walked in, polite, composed. He scanned the room. Then he saw me, standing in the kitchen doorway, apron on, hair pulled back, sweat at my temples from 3 hours of cooking. Patricia swooped in. "Oh, that's Thea, our younger daughter. She helps around the house." Frank nodded politely. A flicker of something crossed his face, recognition, maybe, but it passed. He moved on to the living room, and Richard led him out the back door to tour the land. My land. Dinner started at 2 o'clock. 14 people around a table set with Patricia's best china, the white plates with the blue border that only came out on holidays, candles lit, napkins folded, everything arranged to look like a family that had it all figured out. Richard stood at the head of the table, tapped his glass with a fork. "I want to give thanks," he said, his voice carrying that Sunday sermon warmth he put on for company. "For this family, for this home, and especially for my Meredith, Dr. Meredith O'Neill Hartley, who makes us all so proud." Applause. Warm, automatic, like clapping at church. Meredith smiled. Tight, practiced. Beside her, Donald stared at his plate. His jaw was clenched. No one noticed. Richard wasn't done. "And of course, Thea." He paused, let the beat land, grinned. "One daughter is a doctor, the other one is a maid." He laughed, that low, self-satisfied chuckle I'd heard 100 times. A few people laughed with him, Cousin Ray, Uncle Jim, the nervous, reflexive kind of laughter that fills the space when nobody knows what else to do. Most of the table went quiet. Pastor David looked down at his napkin. Ruth pressed her lips together. Donna Calloway shifted in her seat. Frank, sitting 3 chairs to my right, didn't laugh. He looked at my father, then he looked at me. Under the table, Lily's hand found mine. Her small fingers were cold. I squeezed them. Didn't speak. Didn't react. Not yet. But I felt Frank's gaze stay on me a beat longer than it should have. Like a man trying to place a face, like a puzzle piece hovering just above the right slot. He hadn't connected it, not yet. But the evening was young. After the main course, after the turkey was carved and the sides were passed and everyone had seconds, Patricia stood up. She held her glass like a woman about to receive an award. "I just want to add my own little toast," she said, her voice honey-sweet. "To Meredith, the light of our family. We are so, so blessed." She didn't say my name. She didn't look at me. She didn't mention Lily. The table murmured approval, more clinking, more smiles aimed at Meredith, who by now looked like she wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. And then, in the silence after the glasses were set down, came a small voice. "Mommy?" Lily, sitting right next to me, her eyes wide and wet and confused. "Mommy, why does Grandpa say you're just a maid?" The table froze. Every fork stopped. Every breath held. Is being a maid bad? 8 years old, asking in front of 14 adults whether her mother's work made her less than. Patricia recovered first. "Lily, honey, Grandpa was just being funny." Lily looked at her grandmother. But nobody laughed. Silence. The kind that has weight. I looked at my daughter, this small, brave, honest person who had just said out loud what no adult at this table had the courage to say. I looked at Frank Calloway, who was watching with something I couldn't quite read. I looked at my father, still standing at the head of the table, glass in hand, smile fading, and something inside me, something that had been bent and stretched and stepped on for 6 years, for 20 years, for my whole life. Finally, quietly, broke. Not broke apart. Broke free. I set my napkin on the table, pushed my chair back, and stood up. The chair scraped against the hardwood. Every head turned. I looked at my daughter first. Then I spoke. "Lily, being a maid is not bad. Any honest work is good work." My voice was level, calm, the way I talk to clients, not the way I used to talk to my father. "But since Grandpa brought it up, let me tell you what Mommy actually does." Richard's smile vanished. "Thea, sit down. This isn't the time." "You made it the time, Dad?" I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. "You stood up in front of 14 people and defined me. Now I get to define myself." The room was airless. Patricia's hand went to her throat. Meredith's eyes went wide. "I started by cleaning houses," I said, looking at Lily but speaking to every person at that table. That's true. I'm not ashamed of that. But I didn't stop there. I let one beat of silence pass. "I built a company. It's called Magnolia Estate Services. I manage 15 luxury properties across the Shenandoah Valley. I have 12 full-time employees, and last year my revenue was $2.3 million. Nothing. No sound. No movement. Just 14 people recalculating everything they thought they knew about me. Richard's face. I'll never forget it. The color drained from his cheeks like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Patricia." "Thea, why are you making a scene?" "I'm not making a scene, Mom. I'm finishing Dad's toast." Then from the far end of the table, I heard a glass being set down. Slowly, deliberately. Frank Calloway was staring at me, not with surprise, with recognition, the kind that comes when the last tumbler in a lock finally clicks. "Wait," he said. Frank stood, not fast, not dramatic, the way a man stands when something important needs to be said, and he's not the type to shout. "Thea O'Neill," he said, "you're the owner of Magnolia Estate Services." Every eye in the room moved between us. "Yes, Mr. Calloway." Frank turned to my father. His expression had shifted, polite confusion giving way to something harder. "Richard, you didn't tell me your daughter runs Magnolia." My father's mouth moved, but nothing came out. "She's been managing my entire Shenandoah portfolio for 2 years. 3 properties. Full-service contracts." Frank's voice was even, factual, the way someone speaks when they're choosing their words carefully because the wrong ones would cause damage. "She's one of the best operators in the region." Richard gripped the back of his chair. I didn't know." "You didn't know." Frank repeated it flatly, not a question, a verdict. "Richard, last Tuesday you told me your younger one was between jobs." The room inhaled. "Between jobs." Uncle Jim repeated it under his breath. Aunt Carol covered her mouth. Pastor David closed his eyes. Patricia tried to save it. "We always knew Thea was hardworking." Frank didn't look at her. He was still looking at Richard, and Richard was looking at the tablecloth like he could disappear into it. "You invited me into your home," Frank said quietly. "You introduced your daughter as the maid. And the whole time, she's the person I trust with a portfolio worth more than this entire street. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something stranger, like watching a wall come down and realizing I'd been standing behind it my entire life. Lily tugged my hand. I looked down. "Mommy?" she whispered. "Is that the man from your Tuesday calls?" I almost laughed. "Yes, baby, that's him." The doorbell rang. The timing was so precise it almost felt staged. But it wasn't. Gloria had always had a sense for dramatic entrances, probably the one thing she and Richard had in common. Patricia opened the door. Her face went white. Gloria Ashford stood on the porch in a navy coat, holding a bottle of wine in one hand and a magazine in the other. Her silver hair was pinned back, and she smiled the way a woman smiles when she's been waiting 10 years for this exact moment. "What are you doing here?" Richard's voice cracked. "You weren't invited." "I know." Gloria stepped inside. Her eyes swept the room, the frozen guests, the scattered silverware, the 14 faces that looked like they'd collectively forgotten how to breathe. "But I brought something for my niece." She walked past Patricia, past Richard, straight to the table. She laid the Shenandoah Business Journal flat on the white tablecloth, right between the cranberry sauce and the gravy boat. Then she opened it to the feature spread, a full page with a photograph of me standing in front of a stone estate, arms crossed, Magnolia logo on the van behind me. The headline, "Magnolia Estate Services, How a Single Mom Built a $2.3 million Business from Scratch." The magazine went hand to hand. Aunt Carol, Pastor David, Ruth, Donna Calloway, who read it twice. Ray's wife held it up to the light like she was inspecting a diamond. Richard stood at the head of the table and watched his carefully constructed evening disintegrate. Gloria looked at her brother, not with cruelty, but with something closer to grief. "You've been so busy being ashamed of your daughter," she said, "that you missed what she actually became." Richard said nothing. For the first time in 63 years, Richard O'Neill had absolutely nothing to say. Frank picked up the magazine, read the first paragraph, set it down. Then he turned to Richard with the expression of a man who's just had a contract renegotiated without his consent. "Richard," his voice was measured, "the land you're selling me, that's the land your daughter lives on?" Richard's jaw tightened. "That's a separate matter." "Is your daughter being displaced because of our deal?" Silence again. But this silence had teeth. I spoke. Not loudly, not with any satisfaction, just clearly. "I saw the contract on his desk last week. He asked me to sign a move-out agreement by Thanksgiving. The sale price is $410,000, and he told you the cottage was empty." Frank sat back in his chair. He rubbed his forehead with one hand. "Richard, I don't do business this way. Frank, this is a family matter. It became my business the moment you lied to me." Frank shook his head. "You told me that cottage was vacant. I based my offer on that." The table had splintered into a dozen private reactions. Aunt Carol whispered to Jim. Pastor David's wife gripped her husband's arm. The Warrens looked like they were watching a car accident in slow motion. And then, from the quiet end of the table, Donald Hartley spoke. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't used it in weeks. "But this isn't right. None of this is right." Meredith looked at her husband. For a moment, something passed between them. Not love, not forgiveness, but maybe the ghost of why they'd chosen each other in the first place. She reached under the table and took his hand. The room was in ruins. Not from yelling, not from violence, just from the truth, standing in the middle of a Thanksgiving table, refusing to sit back down. Frank stood up. He buttoned his jacket, a small, deliberate gesture that somehow said more than any speech could. "Richard, I'm going to need to pause our discussions about the land." His voice was cordial, professional, final. "I need to think about this." Everyone at that table understood. Pause meant done. The way we should talk means it's already over. Richard tried. "Frank, let's discuss this privately. We've been talking privately." Frank straightened his cuffs. "That seems to be the problem." He turned to me. A slight nod. Not warm, not cold, professional, one business owner to another. Thea, I'll call you Monday. We have work to do. Yes, sir, thank you. Frank placed his hand on Donna's back. She stood, gathered her purse, and they walked out the front door without looking back. Within 5 minutes, Pastor David and Ruth excused themselves. Early morning tomorrow, David said, but his eyes lingered on Richard with something that looked like disappointment. The Warrens followed, then Ray and his wife. The excuse carousel turned and turned, headache, long drive, early flight, until the table that had seated 14 was down to 6. Richard sat in his chair, the patriarch at the head of an empty table. His glass was still full. His plate was untouched. The man who had opened the evening with a toast and a laugh now sat in a silence so thick you could hear the candles burning down. $410,000. Gone. His reputation in a community that valued reputation above almost everything? Shattered. Not because I attacked him, not because I humiliated him, but because I told the truth. And the truth did what it always does when you've been lying long enough. It introduced itself. The house was quiet now, dishes untouched, candles guttering, 6 people in a room that felt emptier than 0. I lifted Lily off her chair. She wrapped her arms around my neck and rested her head on my shoulder, the way she did when she was 2, back when I carried her into this house with nothing. I walked to where Richard and Patricia sat. Not close, just close enough. I'll be out of the cottage by the end of the month. Richard looked up. Not because you asked, I said. Because I should have left a long time ago. Thea? His voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. I'm not angry, Dad. I'm done waiting for you to see me. Patricia's face crumpled. The tears came. Real ones this time. Not the ones she used as currency. But for the first time in my life, I didn't rush to fix them. I looked at Meredith. She sat with her hands flat on the table, mascara slightly smudged, Donald's arm still touching hers. She met my eyes and nodded. Small. No words needed. I turned and walked to the front door. Gloria was standing on the porch. She hadn't come inside for the ending. She'd been waiting out here, hands in her coat pockets, watching the November sky turn dark. My living room is big enough, she said simply. Plenty of space for 2. Lily lifted her head and looked at Gloria. Are you the lady who sends me birthday cards? Gloria smiled. Every single year, sweetheart. I strapped Lily into the car seat, closed the door, sat behind the wheel. In the rearview mirror, the house got smaller. The porch light flickered. Nobody came out to wave. I took a breath, a full one, deep enough to fill every corner of my lungs. For the first time in 6 years. In a town like Millbrook, you don't need the internet. You have church. By Sunday, 3 days after Thanksgiving, the story had traveled through every pew, every coffee hour, every parking lot conversation after service. 14 guests meant 14 households, and each household told 5 more. By the time the week was out, every person who'd ever shaken Richard O'Neill's hand at a Rotary meeting knew what had happened at his dinner table. The fallout was specific and measurable. Pastor David called Richard directly. I think it's best if you step back from the fundraiser committee this year, Richard. Focus on your family. Translation: don't show your face. Patricia's women's auxiliary group, the one that organized the Christmas charity drive every December, politely informed her that we're going in a different direction with leadership this year. The woman who delivered the message told a friend, who told her hairdresser, who told me, we need people who uplift other women, Patricia. The Shenandoah Business Journal hit newsstands that Wednesday. Kelsey's article ran with my photo on the secondary cover. Within the week, 3 property owners I'd never contacted reached out to Magnolia. I read the article, each one said, like a password. Mrs. Patterson, Lily's teacher, stopped me at pickup. I saw it, she said, holding up the magazine. I always knew there was more to you than this town gave you credit for. In the grocery store, at the gas station, at the post office, people looked at me differently. Not with pity, not with the polite condescension I'd grown accustomed to, with something new, respect. And Richard? Richard, who had built his entire identity on being the most respected man on his street, stopped going to church, stopped going to Rotary, stopped answering his phone. The silence from the big house was deafening. Meredith called 2 days after Thanksgiving, Not to apologize on behalf of our parents, not to smooth things over. Donald and I are separating, she said. I told Mom and Dad last night. How did they take it? A long pause. Mom said, "This can't be happening. First Thea, now you." Meredith's voice cracked on the word first, like she was hearing it for what it really was. Not concern, but inventory. Patricia wasn't mourning her daughter's pain. She was counting her losses. And Dad? Nothing. He just sat there. I think he's run out of speeches. I pictured it. Richard at his desk, the patriarch who had lost his audience and his stage in the same week. A man who'd spent decades performing fatherhood for other people and had never learned how to do it in private. Meredith started calling me more after that. Not long conversations. Short ones. Awkward. Honest. "How did you do this at 24? She asked one night. "Badly, but I did it." She laughed. A real one, the kind I hadn't heard from her since we were kids sharing a bedroom and whispering past midnight. "I always thought you were the brave one," she said quietly. "I was just the one with the diploma on the wall." I didn't correct her, because she was right. Not about the bravery, about the diploma. That's all it had ever been. A diploma on a wall in a house where image was everything and love was conditional. We weren't suddenly close. There was too much silence between us for that. But something had shifted, like two trees that had grown in different directions finally finding out their roots still touched underground. It wasn't a movie ending. It was a Tuesday night phone call, and that was enough. The call came 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. I was washing dishes in Gloria's kitchen when my phone lit up. DAD. I dried my hands, answered. "Thea." His voice was different. Not softer exactly, but smaller. Like someone had turned down the volume on a speaker that had been blasting for 63 years. "Hi, Dad." "You've made your point. Can we move past this?" I leaned against the counter. "Move past what, exactly?" "The Thanksgiving thing." "That wasn't a thing, Dad. That was 14 people watching you humiliate your own daughter while she cooked your dinner in front of her child." Silence. The kind that stretches so long you can hear the other person breathing. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to get caught. There's a difference." More silence. I could hear a clock ticking on his end, the old grandfather clock in the hallway, the one that had been there since I was 4. "The land deal fell through," he said, quieter now. "Frank pulled out." "I know. I'm in trouble, Thea, financially." I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted to help. The part that was his daughter. The part that remembered him teaching me to ride a bike in that driveway, holding the seat until I could balance. But I wasn't going to save a man who had spent 6 years drowning me. "When you're ready to talk, really talk, I'll be here." I kept my voice steady, not cold, not warm, just clear. "But I won't sit at another table where my daughter learns to be ashamed of her mother." He didn't respond. The line went dead. I stood in Gloria's kitchen for a long time, phone in hand, staring at nothing. Lily ran through the hall chasing Gloria's cat, laughing. That sound was enough. It had to be. By mid-December, the townhouse was starting to feel like home. It was a 2-bedroom rental on Maple Street, 8 minutes from Lily's school, 12 from the Magnolia office. Not fancy. Clean. Ours. The first morning, Lily padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, holding a stack of photographs. She'd cut them from the family album I'd brought. The cottage, the garden, the main house porch. She taped one picture to the refrigerator. It was from Easter 2 years ago. Lily on Richard's lap, both of them laughing. I looked at it. My daughter had included everyone. Her grandparents, Meredith, even Donald. She hadn't erased anyone. I didn't take it down, because boundaries aren't about pretending people don't exist. They're about choosing how close they get to stand. That week, Frank Calloway called. Not about the land, about the business. "I'm expanding the portfolio," he said. 2 new developments in Rockingham County. I want Magnolia to handle both, and I've referred you to 2 colleagues. By January, revenue projections for the coming year hit $3.4 million. I hired 3 more people, moved from a home office to a real one. A converted storefront on Main Street with the Magnolia logo painted on the glass. Gloria came over every Sunday. She'd bring pecan pie, sit on the living room floor with Lily, and build Lego castles that were structurally questionable but architecturally ambitious. One Sunday, Lily looked up from her castle and said, "Mommy, I told my friend today that you run a whole company. She said that's really cool." I smiled. "What did you say?" I said, "I know, she's my mom." I turned to the window so Lily wouldn't see me cry, but Gloria saw. And she just nodded, the way someone nods when they've been waiting a long time for something good to finally arrive. Meredith's divorce was finalized in February. She rented a one-bedroom apartment in Charlottesville, the first time in her life she'd lived alone. No roommate, no husband, no parents' guest room to fall back on. Just her, a futon, and a box of takeout menus. She called me the first night. "I'm terrified," she said. "How did you do this at 24? "Badly," I said. "Really badly. I burned rice for 6 months." She laughed. I laughed. It was the kind of laughter that only happens between people who've seen each other at their worst and decided to show up anyway. "Mom called," Meredith said after a beat. "She's upset that neither of us came home for Christmas." "That's her choice to be upset. We don't owe anyone a performance." A pause. "When did you get this wise?" "It's not wisdom, it's scar tissue." Meredith was quiet for a moment. Then, "You know what I used to be jealous of? Not your company, not the money." "Then what?" "The way you didn't care what they thought. I spent my whole life performing for Dad. The grades, the degree, the marriage. Every choice I made was a line in his speech. And the whole time you were just living." "I cared what they thought," I said. "I just ran out of room to show it." We talked for another hour. About nothing, about everything. Lily's school, Meredith's patience, a recipe for lemon chicken that neither of us could get right. It wasn't the sister relationship from a Hallmark movie. It was two women in their 30s learning each other for the first time without their parents' scoreboard hanging between them. It was messy. It was real. And honestly, it was the best conversation I'd had in years. The letter arrived in March. Not an email, not a text. A handwritten envelope in my mailbox. The kind with a stamp pressed slightly crooked, like someone who hadn't mailed a letter in years. I recognized the handwriting. Tight, slanted, all capitals. My father wrote the same way on birthday cards when I was a child, back when he still sent them. I sat on the porch steps. Lily was at school. The street was quiet. Inside the envelope was a single card, cream-colored. No store-bought sentiment, just 6 words in blue ink. "Thea, I read the article. Dad." 6 words. "No, I'm sorry. No, I was wrong." No explanation, no excuse, no mention of the land deal or Thanksgiving, or the years of jokes that had cut deeper than he'd ever understand. Just, "I read the article." I held the card for a long time, turned it over. Nothing on the back. Part of me wanted to call him. The daughter part. The part that still remembered the weight of his hand on my shoulder when I learned to ride a bike, how he held on until I said I was ready, and how he let go exactly when I asked. But I didn't call. I set the card on the kitchen table next to a vase of magnolias Gloria had brought the day before. I didn't throw it away. I didn't frame it. I just left it there, like a door cracked open, not swung wide. Maybe it would take years. Maybe it would never come. A full conversation. A real apology. The kind that doesn't start with, "Can we move past this?" but with, "I see what I did." But my peace doesn't depend on his timing anymore. His 6 words weren't enough, but they were his first. And my peace doesn't depend on his second. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, became successful enough, my parents would just change. Like there was a magic number, a revenue figure, a magazine cover, a title fancy enough to unlock their approval. But here's what I've learned. You can't earn love from people who aren't willing to give it. All you can do is stop letting that absence define you. If you're going through something like this, if you're still sitting at a table where you're the punchline, what have you done about it? Or what do you wish you'd done? Tell me in the comments. I'm telling you this story from the porch of my townhouse on Maple Street. It's a Thursday evening. Lily's inside, doing homework at the kitchen table, the one we picked out together at Gloria's antique shop. The magnolia logo on my office window catches the light when I drive past every morning. 12 employees became 16. Frank's referrals became long-term contracts. The magazine article led to a local business award. And last month, a woman called from Richmond. She'd found Magnolia online and said, "I heard about you from my cousin. She said you started from nothing." I didn't correct her. Because nothing isn't the right word. I started from a 300-square-foot cottage, a 2-year-old daughter, and a family that thought I was a punchline. That's not nothing. That's everything, just pointed in the wrong direction. I don't tell this story for revenge. I'm not interested in making my father look bad. He did that himself, in front of 14 witnesses, on a holiday meant for gratitude. I tell this story because somewhere, right now, someone is watching this at 2 in the morning, lying in bed, wondering if they're allowed to say enough. Wondering if setting a boundary with the people who raised you makes you ungrateful, or selfish, or wrong. It doesn't. Setting a boundary is not betrayal. It's the first honest thing you can do in a relationship built on silence. And if no one else has told you, your work matters. Your effort matters. You don't need a title or a toast or anyone's permission to be proud of who you are. Lily and I are eating ice cream on the porch steps. The sun is going down. She's got chocolate on her chin and she's laughing at absolutely nothing. This is what freedom sounds like. If this story meant something to you, hit like and share it. Not for me, but for the next person who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, from real people who stood up when staying quiet would have been easier. And if you haven't watched the last video, the link's right there in the description. I think you'll connect with that one too. Thank you for being here with me tonight. Take care of yourselves, and take care of each other.